Okay, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening to everyone, whatever time it is now when you're watching this video. So I'm Roger. The talk today is on how does the Penang Transport Master Plan fit to the global transportation trends that we are seeing right now. So I've previously given this talk in Distance College on the 12th of September 2018. However, I've received some suggestions from people to re-narrate and re-record this video to upload it online so that more people can listen to this talk and have an understanding of the Penang Transport Master Plan. So before talking about Penang, it's first important to understand this generalized conceptual model on the developments in urban transport policies in Western European cities. So here, the x-axis is time, which span between 40 to 50 years, and the y-axis here is the car use and ownership in a city. So here we see that cities tend to follow a transport policy development cycle, and we can identify 3 stages, and they are associated with different perspectives and priorities in transport policies. So for stage 1, which happened right after the Second World War in Western European cities, we see a rapid growth in car ownership and car use, and the focus is on the vehicle. We can see, and there's a strong pressure for cities to build new roads to accommodate for the increased car use, as well as providing more parking spaces. And this rapid growth in car use is also seen as a positive sign of a developing economy and society. And at the same time, we see a lack in investment in public transport, walking, and cycling. So, for taking examples of what we see today, so Indian cities such as Mumbai and Kolkata are currently in stage 1, where we see that there's lots of constructions of roads and flyovers that are approved in an attempt to decongest traffic. However, as time goes on in stage 1, city authorities start to realize that, oh hey, we cannot afford to keep building more roads to accommodate for more car use because of the lack of space in our city centers, and the negative externalities of the car now becomes apparent. For example, we can see a deterioration of air quality in city centers, an increased rate of accidents, traffic congestion remains present, and the street environment remains poor. So as a result of that, we see a paradigm shift from stage 1 to stage 2, where the focus is now on moving people instead of vehicles. And city authorities now start to restrain road traffic to tackle traffic congestion, and the focus now switches from cars to improving public transport such as buses and rails that is more efficient in terms of land use. And here, for example, because of these initiatives, we see that car use and ownership in the cities now start to peak. And so cities that are currently at stage 2 right now, examples like our capital city, Kuala Lumpur, or Chinese cities such as Beijing and Shanghai, where the Chinese Economic Planning Body recently approved about £95 billion worth of underground and MRTs and LRTs for the cities in an attempt to decongest traffic congestion. However, stage 2 is not perfect either, because we still see that it's difficult for commuters to access public transport or train stations, and we still see a poor quality street environment. So as a result of that, we see an emphasis, again, a paradigm shift from stage 2 to stage 3, where the focus now shifts from mobility to accessibility, livability, and quality of life, where the main emphasis now is on efficient and sustainable modes of transport, and such as rails, buses, walking and cycling infrastructures. At stage 3, we see that cities start to pedestrianize their streets, as well as introduce some congestion charging to further restrain car use. And at stage 3 as well, we see an integration of land use and transport policies, and as a result of that, car use now starts to decline. So here, this is the real, on the x-axis here is again over time, and the y-axis is the car modal share with real data for 4 cities of London, Paris, Vienna, and Copenhagen. Here again, stage 1, we see a rapid growth in car use, and then the peak after that, like recently, car use now starts to decline. So where does Penang currently sit in the urban transport policy development process? So Penang is currently in stage 1, as we can agree that it is still heavily emphasized on cars and roads. For example, the percentage car modal share in Penang is 96.8%. And for the second metric, the total highway length per 1,000 people. So what we've done is that we've added all the total highway length in Penang Island and normalize it with the city population. So we're going to use this metric and compare it with other cities around the world. And in order to have a fair comparison, we need to normalize this with the city population. And for the third metric, the total public transport route with a right of way. So right of way means that the public transport have dedicated lanes and does not share lanes with the car traffic, and it will not be stuck in traffic congestions. So examples of this are like LRTs, trams, or MRTs, or BRTs as well. And here we can see that there is, for right now, there's no, Penang does not have any public transport route with a dedicated right of way. Fourthly, the vehicle to population ratio for Penang is 1.39, meaning that there's more vehicles to the population in Penang Island. So despite Penang being in stage 1 right now, we can see that phase 1 of the Penang Transport Master Plan plans to construct only one LRT line costing 8 billion, but significantly more roads and highways such as the Pan Island Lake Expressway, North Coast Pair Road, the undersea tunnel, multiple bypasses and interchanges, all costing at least 15 billion. So as a result of that, we can see that modeling work suggests that the total highway length per 1,000 people, the highway supply in Penang Island increases much faster than the total public transport route with a right of way. So how does these figures compare with other cities around the world? So here we can see examples of Zurich, Singapore, and Stockholm, which the Penang state government always likes to compare with. So here we see that the percentage car modal share for these three cities are less than 50%. And by comparing the total highway supply and public transport supply in the city, for example, Zurich has 8 times more public transport route with a right of way compared to its highway. And again, for Singapore, has slightly more public transport routes as well as Stockholm. And importantly, the vehicle to population ratio for these 3 cities are less than 1. So meaning that there's significantly less vehicles relative to the population. So will more highways solve Penang's traffic congestion woes? The answer is no. More highways will only solve traffic congestion between interurban trips. For example, trips between Ayer Itam to Georgetown, or from Georgetown to Tanjung Tokong, or from Georgetown to Bayan Baru, essentially the green lines. However, traffic problem within an urban area will continue to worsen. So for example, we will still see traffic congestion and parking problems within Georgetown, within the red circles, or within Ayer Itam or Tanjung Tokong. So think of this for an example, like as you drive past Lim Chong Yu Highway, as we all usually do, we can see that, let's say if we travel from Bayan Baru to Georgetown, we can see that traffic is smooth all the way until we approach the exit towards Georgetown, and the traffic starts to pile up. So in other words, is that more highways, essentially you just shift the bottleneck from one point to another, and because Georgetown has local capacity issues within the local roads, you will get traffic congestion even with the highways. So a 2-lane highway to a city center typically adds about 10,000 additional vehicles a day to the surface streets, increasing local traffic problems. So more parking, in order to accommodate for this increase in additional vehicles, more parking space is required, and the local roads have to be expanded in order to accommodate for this increase in car use and dependence. So the question that we have now is that, does Penang has enough land and space to expand its roads and add more parking space within Georgetown or within their urban centers? The answer is no. So will more LRTs and monorails move Penang from stage 1 to stage 2? So in my opinion, the proposed LRT is great. It will likely increase the public transport modal share in Penang Island. However, the question we have is, can Penang afford it? Or does Penang have enough population to support this LRT line? So right now, SRS Consortium forecasted that 42 million trips will be made within the first year after the Penang LRT is operational. So we've compared this annual ridership projections for the Penang LRT versus other mass transit lines around the world. The metric here we use is the annual passenger journeys per person. So what we've taken the annual ridership projection and divided with the city population. So we normalize this in order to have a fair comparison with other MRT lines around the world, because their cities have different population sizes. So here we can see that within the first year after the Penang LRT is operational, it is projected to have an annual ridership projection of higher than most MRT lines in London, Singapore, and Kuala Lumpur on a per capita basis. So take, for example, this London Docklands Light Railway, which is an LRT in London. It has even the actual ridership is slightly less than per capita, is slightly less than the Penang LRT. And again, Singapore's East-West line is connected to Changi Airport as well. And again, we've only seen that the actual ridership is only per capita slightly higher than the Penang LRT. So it's important to note that this DLR and the Singapore East-West line is opened in the 1990s. So if we look at the more recent lines, such as the Singapore Downtown line, which is fully opened in October 2017, and KL's SBK, the Sungai Buloh Kajang MRT line, we see that these actual riderships within the first year is much lower than the Penang LRT on a per capita basis. So to focus more on this Kuala Lumpur Sungai Buloh Kajang MRT line, the actual ridership within the first year after it's fully operational, it's only around 20 million trips that was done within the first year, compared to the Penang LRT, which is forecasted to have 42 million trips within the first year. So how is this possible? Like our capital city of Kuala Lumpur has more population than Penang, yet the actual ridership for Penang Island for the Penang LRT is forecasted to be more than the KL SBK MRT. So it doesn't make sense.
Do you think, and does anyone think this LRT ridership forecast is realistic, where within 1 year of operation, our LRT ridership will be higher than London, Singapore, and Kuala Lumpur?
Yes. It's only one line, the one direction only.
Yes, and the London Victoria line, for example, we see it's one of the highest annual passenger journeys per person. It's because this London Victoria line is the busiest London Underground line, and it has interchanges with all other London Underground lines. But for Penang LRT, it's just one LRT line without any interchange. And let's say if we scale it down to a more realistic ridership forecast projections from 42 million to around 10 million, we can see that the loss in ticket revenues could amount to at least 1.2 billion over 10 years. So how does this compare with the estimated revenue for the Penang State budget in 2018? So the estimated revenue for the Penang State budget is around 500 million for 2018. And if we divide 1.2 billion by 10, so it's about 120 million per year of losses. So that's about 20% of, so the state has to incur about 20% of the losses for this LRT project.
Alone,
without SRS Consortium, they are not liable to any losses.
So how did SRS Consortium arrive at a figure of 42 million annual passenger journeys for within the first year after the LRT is operational? So one reason is simply because they use inflated population figures for the entire Penang state. So to give you an example of how ridiculous their inflated population figures are, so this is an example of the 3 SRS reclaimed islands. So SRS Consortium, they predicted that around 360,000 people will be living in this 3 reclaimed island by the year 2030. So what I've done is that I've divided this population with the total land area for this 3 reclaimed island, which is about 17 kilometers square, to obtain the population density and then compare it with other cities around the world. So here we can see that the population density for the 3 SRS reclaimed island is estimated to be around 20,000, slightly higher than 20,000 people per square kilometer. So to show you how ridiculous this population density figure is, you can see that it's actually higher than the city centers of Paris, London, Singapore, New York City, and many other cities around the world. So the question we have is that what is there so interesting in these 3 reclaimed islands to the point where the population density is higher than the capital cities in most countries around the world? So these are the questions that Penang Knights should ask the Penang state government and to clarify this issue, which they have not provided any answers at all at this very moment. So, okay, if we do not have LRT, so what else can we do to promote public transport? So there are cheaper public transport alternatives available. As we can see here in this table, you can see, for example, the construction costs per kilometer for the LRT elevated is estimated to be about 220 million ringgit per kilometer. And if you compare it to modern trams that's at grade, so meaning that it's on street level, the construction cost is only about 50 million ringgit per kilometer, and the BRT is even cheaper. It's about 25 million ringgit per kilometer. So what does this mean? For the same amount of money, 1 kilometer of LRT line could build around 3 kilometers of modern trams, or 4.4 kilometers of the BRT routes. So BRT means bus rapid transit here, as we can see here in the picture on the bottom right. And for modern trams as well, you can see it can run at street level as well as it being elevated. So the main point on this slide is that we can use the money more effectively. So instead of building the Penang LRT, we can build a bigger public transport network so that this public transport can reach more areas within Penang Island. So there's another argument that whether or not Penang has enough road space to support trams. So the answer is yes, because the Penang state government failed to take into account that one bus can take 40 cars off the road, and a modern tram can take 200 cars off the road, hence freeing up road space for modern trams and BRTs to be run at street level. So the other question is that would restricting vehicular traffic limit Penang's economic growth? The answer is no again, because at the moment there's insufficient evidence to show that restricting vehicular traffic will affect economic growth in a city. So take the London congestion charging scheme for an example. It was introduced on the 17th of February 2003, and overall the car traffic in London was reduced by around 20 to 30% 1 week after this congestion charging scheme is introduced, but its impact on the local economy hasn't been an overwhelming one. So for example, we see a conflicting street survey results where one survey reported a 13.8% drop in central London shoppers, and another reported a 4.7% increase. So why is this the case? So why isn't this the case? So here we can see that there's a study as well done by the UITP, a world-renowned public transport organization. Here we can see that it says that the economic benefits of public transport are 5 times higher than the money invested in it. So here, these two pictures below, this is in Helsinki in Finland, and the bottom right is in Zurich in Switzerland, capital of Switzerland. We can see that whenever we restrict cars into the city centers and only allow for trams, they can bring in more people inside the city, and it also frees up the available land space that we initially need for parking spaces to be allocated to parking spaces, to be freed up for wider pedestrian roadways, and bring in more people to support the local economy. So what about stage 3? So how does stage 3 look like right now? So this is the example of New York's Times Square in USA. So this picture that we see right now is before Times Square. A street in Times Square is pedestrianized, where we can see lots of cars right now. So the city authorities decided to pedestrianize the streets, and here we can see that there's more social and economic activity that's happened within Times Square. So the question now I have to people is that which scene provided a more pleasant environment for city dwellers and tourists?
Who thinks it's better after pedestrianization? Come on. Ooh. Okay.
But then people, for us Malaysians and in Singapore, there's an argument that our climate is hot, so we can't support having pedestrianization of streets. But the thing is that just go to Singapore and you can see that you need a better planning where you need to have shaded walkways and the shopping malls and everything has to be more integrated. So although our jobs is more difficult because it's a hot climate, but it's not impossible.
Okay, so now moving to the next example of this city of Cheonggyecheon, the Cheonggyecheon River stream in Seoul. Here we can see that this picture is in the 1950s to 60s. There's an elevated highway above the river. So and the city authorities decided to demolish the elevated highway and replace this with a BRT scheme, a bus rapid transit scheme. And here we can see right now this river is opened up, and now we see which scene provided a more pleasant environment for city dwellers and tourists. I guess the answer is clear. So now to summarize what I have with my slides right now. So we've previously showed that Penang is currently in stage 1 in the urban transport policy development process. And given that Penang's car modal share is currently at 96%, 96.8%, and the Penang Transport Master Plan is heavily focused on vehicular traffic, how can the Penang government ever hope to achieve its 40% public modal share target by the year 2030?
And based on simple modeling studies for phase 1 of the PTMP, we estimate that the public transport modal share by 2030, after PIL1 and after the RRT is implemented, it will only be around like 10 to 20%. So meaning that this public transport modal share target will be missed by a significant margin.
And the next question is that while we've also seen that the 3 proposed highways are only expected to resolve traffic congestion for inter-urban trips, so what plan does the Penang State Government have in place to resolve the localized traffic congestion and parking limitations within urban centres?
So like people, for us Penangites, you like to park our cars right in front of a coffee shop just to have our food, but can we really, is it even realistic to accommodate for more cars, to bring in even more cars to our streets where it's really so limited in space?
Thirdly, we've also shown that modern trams and the BRTs are cheaper to build, operate and maintain. So how did the Penang government arrive at the conclusion to select the LRTs over BRTs and modern trams? Fourthly, again, we've used examples of New York Times Square and the Cheong River stream in Seoul to show that actually we can remove, by removing roads and allocating it to pedestrians, it actually improves the city livability. So given that more elevated highways are shown to deteriorate city livability, how does the Penang Transport Master Plan contribute to the Penang 2030 vision, which was recently announced by the Penang Chief Minister to improve state livability? So if you build more elevated highways, we expect city livability to reduce, and this will likely conflict with one of the goals set by the Penang Chief Minister in its own Penang 2030 vision. So looking back at this 3-stage urban transport policy development process, the challenge we have right now for emerging stage 1 cities such as Penang is that given that Western European cities have gone through these 3 stages, stage 1, stage 2 to stage 3, and have learned many valuable lessons in transport policies, can we not repeat the same mistakes that these Western European cities have gone through and short-circuit this evolutionary learning process where Penang jumps from stage 1 to stage 3? So to recall, Penang is currently in stage 1 right now, where we are being confronted with the negative impacts as a result of overemphasizing on the car. And again, cities in stage 3 right now have shown that we can better use urban streets to facilitate economic and social activities. So can this evolutionary learning process be short-circuited? The answer is yes, provided if we get our priorities right in terms of transport policy and focus more on public transport, walking and cycling facilities, and sustainable transport modes. So when I first landed in Penang about 2-3 weeks ago, the first thing I went to have is to have nice seafood at Gertak Sango, the south of Penang Island. So while I was waiting for my food, I stumbled across this beautiful sunset view in the beach. However, I start to realize that, hang on a second, we might actually lose this view, and this view might be destroyed forever, permanently, when the 3 SRS Reclaim Island is started. So now the question is that, can we actually make do without these 3 SRS Reclaim Islands? My final question for this presentation. The answer is, I think yes, we can make do without these 3 SRS Reclaim Island. For example, the Howker report shows that they propose Penang Island to use more trams, modern trams, and bus rapid transit BRTs, and their public transport component costs around 10 billion, compared to 8 billion for just one LRT line, and another 8 billion for the Pan Island Link Expressway. So yes, if we focus on cheaper alternatives such as modern trams and BRTs, we might actually not need to reclaim this 3 SRS Reclaim Island as our funding model to raise funds to build the Pan Island Link Expressway, which is not necessary, and the Penang LRT, which is overbuilt and very expensive. And again, Penang might not have the population to support this Penang LRT. So hereby I end my talk, and I'm happy to take any questions. So because given that this is being pre-recorded, if you have any questions, you can email me at this email address below. So thank you, and I'll see you all next time.